Sounds like a
Okay,
plan.
we're going.
Here we go. How you doing, everybody? This is Dennis Michelson. Welcome to the Science of Fantasy Football. Why the science of fantasy football? Well, you get a meteorologist and a biologist together. They're going to use the scientific method. What does that mean? You hear it all the time. What is scientific method? It just means we're going to use those statistics to guide us to an answer instead of using statistics the way a drunk uses a light pole for support instead of illumination. And joining me as he does each and every week, 3 times a week during the regular season, when you count our sister show, the Matchup Lab over here at the Sports Affiliation. It is John Bush, a real professor, the fantasy professor. And John, we saw an exciting performance by a young running back on Thursday Night Football.
It was just like the Travion show. Yeah, it's if I'm sure everybody who had him played him, it's just is this a breakout or whatever that means in quotes versus just, with Stevenson when he comes back, is it, let's just carve up the pie, and it was the Hubbard and Dowdle concept. And the first week back, they carved it up and that didn't work. So then they flipped back to Rico. So does New England's coaches have to go through some gyrations to figure out it should be the Travion show? And of course, meantime, people are trying to get to the playoffs. So this is not the time you want coaches to be experimenting, with your players here, with your ownership of these players here. Of course, if you're a Stevenson owner, you like that because at least you would get something. Half of the pie is better than no pie. So it depends on what side of the coin you're on as well.
Yeah, what this is showing is a couple of things. First of all, volume matters more than anything else in fantasy football. I hear so many people trying to make excuses, and they're saying, well, if you take away those lucky touchdowns in week 10, you would have only had a few points. And if you take away the 3 touchdowns on Thursday Night Football, it would have been an average game. Well, actually, 14.3 points is what he would have had without the touchdowns. And if you're not happy with 14.3 points, and I understand we're all greedy in fantasy football, we want 40 points from every player, but there's a difference between reality and what we want, what our greedy minds want. And if you're not happy with 14.3 points, you have no business playing fantasy football because that's a pretty good running back day without getting into the end zone. You're going to see more of your running backs if they're the only guy. And here, we had a split all season. Now he's the only guy with the legitimate shot. Remember at the beginning of the season, we had a 3-way split because we had Gibson in the mix as well. And that really didn't work well. Then when Gibson got hurt, we were down to a 2-man split. That worked a little bit better. But this is why the better than zero strategy for running backs is to grab both sides of the backfield. This is why the Bucky Irving, Rashad White thing worked out well 2 years in a row. And yes, it's frustrating when you have a split backfield and neither side is really benefiting because unlike the Detroit backfield, when they're going good, you can play them both. If you played both Stevenson and Henderson, you wouldn't have gotten over 20 points in any given game this year. And, you know, Stevenson, or I'm sorry, Henderson has only had 2 games over 20 points all season. Stevenson has one. And if you look a little bit lower, you lower the bar to the 15-point spike week number that I like to use. It's, comfortably above league median for running back production. Stevenson's had 2, Henderson's had 2. So it's not like either back has been really dominant. And my favorite statistical manipulation is what I like to call running back math. You see this all the time. Well, if you were to take away those 70-yard runs that he had, his average would have only been 2.2 yards per carry. Welcome to the NFL. Like, that's the reality for a lot of running backs in the NFL, is to gain 2 to 3 yards a carry. If you looked at just the median length of rushing. But I don't play in any leagues that score based on median rushing attempt. Are you in any such leagues? I mean,
No.
there's, when we talk about certain things, it's just nonsensical. All that matters is how many points did you get from a running back or wide receiver, tight end, or quarterback. All these other statistics don't matter, but I think we sometimes have to set our expectations for rookie running backs correctly. Travion Henderson in some of the drafts, some of the FPPC drafts that I participated in this year,
Yeah.
he went middle of the 3rd round. That to me was crazy. 4th round, middle of the 4th, I started looking at him. I looked back at all my Travion Henderson teams in FPPC. I don't have a single share of him that came before the 5th round. And people are saying, well, you draft a guy in the first 7 rounds, he should be an automatic starter. Yeah, I guess I agree with that to a point. But we need to have the right expectations for rookie running backs, and we never do. We see this argument every single year, yet people will tell you, and smart people in fantasy football will tell you, oh, you're lowering your upside potential if you draft both sides of a running back combo. So what? Like, do I want to have just the upside, or do I want to make sure I have 2 viable starting running backs every week of the season? But rookie expectations for running backs, if you have them set way too high, then don't draft rookie running backs. They usually don't pay off until we get past the first 6 to 8 weeks of the season. We see this every year. We see the exception because of injury. But if guys stay healthy, if the veteran stays healthy, those coaches, a lot of those coaches just don't like to risk their offense on a rookie running back. And we need to set our expectations high. But at the same time, Professor, I think this explains why the better than zero strategy has been very successful, because I looked also at every one of my Travion Henderson teams.
Mm-hmm.
They all have Ramondre Stevenson as well.
Right.
I didn't draft one without the other. Just like if I did get Bucky this year, which was much rarer than last year, I protected him with Rachaad White. I just don't understand why expectations are so abnormally high for rookies at any position, but especially running back. Coaches don't like to trust their offense to a guy that's unproven.
Yeah, and there's probably some research questions to be looked at. Uh, when we draft him and do play them both, when is it the time to play them both? Is that DAPS? Is that, There's still questions to be addressed in the better than zero. In other words, those
Yes.
questions, folks, should help us get better. And, it's like, well, we don't know how to refine it better yet because we haven't done enough of the research. That's why we need interns so we can refine everything. Uh, Fantasy football is a complex system. Nothing is probably stands, you know, outside of the others to some extent. And defining the interactions, it's like weather, it's like any complex system. It's, you move one piece and you're not even aware of what the other pieces just did. It's like, what happened to the main piece. It's Jenga, right? You pull one out. Well, what
Yes.
is the force on the rest of the pieces? Does that speed up the time it's going to crash? Or, so there's just a lot out there. And knowing that it's complex is not a easy thing to deal with. It's like, so it's easier just to ignore that, Dennis, and just focus on one thing at a time and not worry about it. And of course, then you lead to, well, this is luck. How did this, where are these people that knew that this could have happened? In other words, I think the level of surprise by you not at least understanding the reality of the complex system, you're surprised too much. I mean, we're all surprised, but you need to expect the unexpected, right? Nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition if you're a Monty Python fan. Well, you should at least know there's a possibility, that door could bust open and there they are, with their pointy pillows and comfy chairs. What a great skit. And so I think that's the landscape, Dennis. That's the top down view that I have. And so I know we're human. That's the thing. We're fighting against our natures because it's easier to forget about the elephant in the room because if you don't, in other words, if you spend too much time, then you kind of get around and round and don't make a decision. You've got to, it's like in horse racing,
Oh, yeah.
right? There's so many variables, and so much happening. And you can go through you think you have the bet, then you go through and well, boy, I missed this. Yeah, look at, and then all of a sudden there goes the gate open and you didn't get to bet at all. And then,
Yes.
horse X, the ones you were thinking about come in, right? And you're mad. And then the next race, you're just, your temperament's off and you make crazy bets. And there goes the mortgage. And you don't, the hot dog man knows you can't even tip him. He's not even going to say you a hot dog because you don't have no money to tip him. So, he just basically move on, go pick up a ticket off the ground and try to get your bankroll back. So Dennis, I don't know, it's this balance. There is a psychological side to it. And I think the better than zero, it's the best that you come up with, and I've followed along to deal with the unexpected, I guess, the black swan concept and try to uh, benefit from chaos. I mean, I think we'll make it better. We will make it better. Okay. But I think that's part of it. And that's always sitting out there. When I hear you talk, I always think about the complexity of the system. And I know being a
Yes.
weather guy, you're aware of that as well. And people forget the guy on the TV at the news, he'll sit there and say this. But behind that is so many other factors. He's distilled it into this. Here's the forecast based on my distillation, and it might not be his, it could be people elsewhere. He's just reading the reports and getting their distillation, and he's distilling the different models, right? The hurricane people with all the different spaghetti models. I mean, you have to kind of at some point put them together and look at the trends. Okay, most of the spaghettis are pointing this way. So I'm assuming the probability is stronger for this sets of models to be right versus the 2 or 3 spears that pointing the exact opposite.
Yes. And I think my weather forecasting training is a lot of the reason why certain strategies in fantasy football have been developed. Because much like fantasy football in weather forecasting, it's a game of probabilities. And you need to make sure for your client, and this is different, TV weather guy, what's he going to do? He's going to rain out a wedding, and, people are going to be ticked off at him if he was saying it's going to be partly cloudy and you get, rain, then the wedding, was forced inside and people are unhappy. Okay. I guess that ruins some days, but it's not going to affect his livelihood because people are going to expect him to be wrong a certain number of times. When I'd put out a forecast, there were, quite often there was millions of dollars that would be on the line. And I wasn't going to be believed for very long if it wasn't just the primary forecast. It was, if I'm wrong, this is the direction it's heading in. And in fantasy football, I think that's the one thing that we seem to lack among a lot of analysts is this humbleness of realizing, even if I did all the work correct, even if the process is really good, injuries happen, weird things happen. A guy fumbles and loses a game, and a coach is worried about losing his job, and he won't give that player another chance. Versus other coaches, they'll be like, if Andy Reid would turn over the offense to a rookie running back, and that guy fumbles 3 times in a row, but he still thinks he's the best player to play the next week, Andy Reid's going to go ahead and do what he thinks is the best because Andy Reid's not worried about getting fired. Brian Dable with the Giants was always coaching as if he was afraid of being fired, and eventually it came true. That's the difference. If you've got a long track record of success as a coach, you're less likely to be worried about taking chances. And then there's guys like Mike Vrabel up in New England with the Patriots. It's not that he's worried about losing his job. It's that he just doesn't trust rookie running backs, and he never has, and he never will. He understands that they got to be drafted because you always need the next guy to take over. But he's not going to give the reins of that offense to a rookie running back, which is why, even though the opportunity index was in his favor, I tempered my expectations for Henderson this year because I knew the coach wasn't one who was willing to hand over the reins of this team to a rookie. That's versus the guy down in Tampa last year with Bucky Irving. I felt pretty good about Bucky Irving's chances because I knew that guy was going to give a shot to the rookie. He wasn't going to worry about it. Heck, he got Baker Mayfield on his roster and quickly turned the whole reins of the team over to Baker, who had failed in 2 other places. He wasn't worried. He wasn't coaching worried. And yeah, that could cost him his job. But he wasn't worried about it. And so I had a better feeling about Bucky Irving last year. And also Bucky Irving was coming to the team a lot cheaper for me. His ADP was a lot lower. I missed on Caleb Johnson this year. I kind of thought that, a coach that has been around for, 19 years without a losing season, wasn't worried about losing his job and would take a chance on a guy, on a rookie. He hasn't. He hasn't turned that team over. In fact, he's put the guy so deep into the doghouse. He's barely he ain't given him even a milk bone, let alone a lot of kibble.
Yeah.
But it's just it's you're gonna miss, I guess this is what I'm getting at. So on the teams that I drafted Caleb Johnson, I tried to get Jaylen Warren also. It's not because I thought Jaylen Warren was going to be the lead running back. It's that I wanted to protect myself because I'm smart enough to realize that I'm not always smart enough when it comes to running backs. And I don't have any secret sauce for figuring out who the best running back is going to be on a team, or if there even is going to be a best running back. And in this situation, I was worried about a split. That's why I wouldn't take Henderson in the third round, mid-third. That was too expensive for me. I didn't say, oh, you are an idiot for taking him middle of third, because based on talent of what I saw of him in college, I'd say in dynasty drafts, I wasn't upset that I didn't get Giante because I kind of liked Henderson and Hampton and Judkins as much. So, and Caleb Johnson was my fourth guy, behind those three. So, but the realization is if I was smarter at this, I'd be a GM of a team and I wouldn't be playing fantasy football. So you have to understand that two things: volume is key and volume is king, especially at the running back position. But you can't always decipher who's going to get that volume. But if there's only one standing, which is what's happened with Travion Henderson,
Yep.
Gibson's out, Stevenson's out. Well, I guess we have to try the kid. He has a decent week. He had a 12-point week in week 9.
Right.
And people are looking at 12 points. Oh, that's only 12. I didn't get much. I'll take 12. I'm not, I'm thrilled with 15 or 20, but I'll take 12. I'll take anything in double figures and be okay with that decision. It doesn't, yeah, I'm greedy. I want 30. I want 40. But if I get 10, I'm still in the game for that week. If every one of my starting players, minus my quarterback, minus the defense and kicker, at FPPC, if all of my running backs and all of my wide receivers and all of my flex guys score at least 10 points, and my tight end, I've had a decent week. I'm not going to take a beating, right?
Yes.
And one of those guys is going to score 20. It's just the inevitable way that the odds are. But if they're all in double figures, I'm okay. It's just like when my favorite baseball team puts a crooked number up on the board. I don't care if it's a 2 or a 5. I'm happy. It wasn't a one-run inning. You take what you can get. But, Professor, volume is so key. And that's why with wide receivers, your target report, I'm telling you, there's some good stuff here. But much like everything else we've done, this is the starting point of research. This ain't the end.
No, that's true. I've just had some time and so some boredom. Plus, I wanted to check for myself. These are the actual figures that I've been generating and things for quite some time, even before Dennis and I got together way back before even fake pigskin. I used to keep track of these kind of things. I think for a couple reasons. First, kind of confirm or deny kind of what I'm thinking. Sometimes we get tricked by what happened last week. So I kind of like to see the trends. I like to look top down from the team level to the position level, then finally to the player. So the top down. And so it's the season concept and it's the weekly, what happened recently. Is that up or down? Is that changed? And then, of course, this week, what do I need? Especially, I think in flexes, deep flexes, that's usually where the questions are. I've got multiple players that I can flip in and out, and that becomes, the question each week. And sometimes you get it, sometimes you don't, but at least you have some mechanism other than gut feeling to try
Oh yeah.
to manipulate your choices. So I posted this. This is not for to tell you what to do, Dennis. I'm, this is just showing you what I use and allowing you to learn how to catch the fish, right? And I just, nobody's paying me for my opinion yet. And then, so I'll just show you, I'll just show you what I'm doing, but I'm going to let you learn how to interpret the data. You use your analytic approach. And again, if you're the kind that, well, just give me the fire, I'll worry about it later, I think long term in this endeavor, you're going to have a harder time being a consistent winner, Dennis. You've got to stretch your analysis wings a little bit and get them strong. And if you never try them out, you just listen to this and that, then just, it's like at the racetrack, walking to the betting window, you'll hear multiple conversations and opinions, and you'll walk by and some guy, man, that horse is really on his toes this week. And you're like, oh, okay. And then you get and you're waiting in front, and the guy in front of you puts 100 to win on another horse, and you're like, oh, well, he must know something. And you're all by the time you get there, you've changed your mind 3 or 4 times. And if you listen to enough shows and Twitter feeds and all these hot takes, Dennis, you'll change your opinion 3 or 4 times before you actually make a decision. So that you can listen, but you still have a, let's say, a foundation to where you're coming from. Your Dennis has MVP. Okay, I have calm. I have these other metrics that I use. Those are our foundations. That doesn't change, right? Dennis's MVP of the player doesn't change, automatically. I mean, it changes after each week. You can, modify it, but that's what it is. And that, as long as you've got a foundation, so that's the part of this. And I've got it up on Science of Fantasy, and I did post a few of these figures on our the sports affiliation. Dennis, not all of them because I got tired of putting them all up there. So I just said, go to the link if you want to see all of them. So the first one, then, let me jump in. Uh, Scale target average weeks 1 to 10. Just, it's nice to see who's been spitting out targets relative to the league. And that's why I like to have these charts is relative to everybody else. That gives you an idea of who's really putting it and finding the extremes. My concept is extreme situations can be more enlightening one way or the other, right? Extreme good, extreme
Yes.
bad, than just run of the mill, right? And so that's what I have found in biology, extreme environments, there's a lot of strange things happen under strange environments in this earth, right? Uh, 2 miles deep in the ocean, the critters down there are strange looking, or the plants, animals that live at the top of the mountains are different than ones at the bottom. They're just, You have to be different. And so I like to see the extremes and think about why the extremes. So Atlanta has had the highest number of targets, and Baltimore and Buffalo are running neck and neck to be the bottom. Isn't
Wow.
that interesting? Buffalo lost last week, and I think they're weaker. And if it wasn't for Cook and Allen, it's like, I think their apple cart is a lot more sensitive to things than we thought in the beginning of the season. I
Yes.
think they were perceived as more of a juggernaut than I think they are. I think this is, a nail or so in their coffin. Baltimore as well. I mean, I know some of that is just, Jackson's been out, but boy, he needs to get on a run now. And so this just sets the table. If you're, thinking about your flex, just kind of where your players should come from and where they shouldn't. Uh, Now, again, this is tight ends, this is running back, this is wide receivers. So it doesn't mean it's the second wide receiver or third. Like Atlanta, Darnell Mooney, you would think, well, man, he must be. No, because they got Pitts, Bijan, I mean, there's a lot of moving pieces before you get to Mooney. Mooney's probably fifth on, the pecking order. So you got to use common sense too, Dennis. This is not just blindly saying something. But Cincinnati, the Lovis wide receiver, will get a spiky week or two. It's just good luck trying to figure out when that week is. It was last week. I think he did pretty good, but who knows this week? And so again, if you're in trouble on your flex, maybe that's how you turn. I would find it harder to turn too deep into some of these red guys here,
Yes.
that kind of thing. And
Yeah. What
oh,
what I
go
would
ahead. Sure,
what I would look at if you go back to this chart.
sure.
So if you look at this chart, and again, you're right. Not every team, their second and third
Yeah,
most targeted guy is not necessarily a wide receiver.
right.
Some teams, it's a tight end or a running back.
Think about Arizona with McBride.
Oh, McBride's the leader of the pack,
Yeah,
and Harrison's number two to him.
and he's gone.
But if you look at this chart, what I would say is the teams that are on the far left, the highest targeted teams, I'm more likely to go to that tertiary guy. And with the teams on the far right, I'm less likely to go to their secondary guy. So that sets you up for saying, take one from the red still, but maybe take three from the highest greens. The muddied middle in the
Good
mess in the
luck.
middle, you're taking maybe two. And if you have to go to a third, I want them at least to be in the positive, like Detroit. Detroit, obviously, Sun God's number one. Laporta, Jameson Williams, and Gibbs are fighting for that second spot every week. But I might go three deep if I had to, because Detroit's in the positive. Kansas City, it's Kelsey and Rice. I'm not happy if I even have to start Worthy now with Rice back. And before Rice coming back, I was okay with starting Hollywood Brown. I'd even start Juju if I had to, when Worthy was out, especially. I'm willing to go deeper than just Kelsey. With Cincinnati, they've got two really great wide receivers. Higgins could be a number one on most of the teams in the league. Their third guy is either Chase Brown out of the backfield or the tight end of choice. And now with Fant, he's the only one left at tight end worth targeting. But this chart I think is very important for, again, just like we do for the scaled power rankings every week. It's get greedy choosing from the best. Be very careful choosing from the worst.
Yes. Uh, there's probably more than we can talk about, Dennis. This I'll just breeze through. If you're curious about the scoring uh, level, targets per snap, I guess
Ooh, I
is
like that.
yeah, and versus the average here. So uh, the speed at which teams are turning over and getting snaps versus targets, that connection. KC is number three, Dennis.
Yep,
They
that
are
makes sense.
really jaunty.
Yep, makes sense.
And Cincinnati and Vegas, not the strongest team, but boy, they turn it over. And so there's a lot of activity there. So this can be speed of opportunity. And here, the Jets and Detroit, though, is a little slower because so you wonder, is this because of the running with
Yes,
Gibbs? You
yes,
see,
yes,
but the
yes,
Jets is that Hall. So I
yes.
think, and look at Carolina, is that Dowdle and Hubbard?
Yeah,
And
I think so.
yeah, that so I think there's some deeper answers with this chart, but again, it's inspiring you to think. And I know people, they're still wiping up their hangover from last night. And, this doesn't help people that don't want to figure it out and get deep. Damn it, I just want the answers. Well, uh, you know, uh, I just, they're not paying me to give you my answers uh, because if I think about it, I can think and lean one way, then somebody's out that surprised me come Sunday morning, and then it can change a little bit. The weather starts becoming a fact. I mean, lots of things can happen, and so if I give you an opinion on a Tuesday, Wednesday, Dennis, that may not be my opinion on a Sunday morning, at
Yes.
11:55. And and I hear the people on the radio they get cranky. People, well, set my lineup on Tuesday. So, well, look, I set my lineup, just make sure I got people that are not playing, but it's never the final. I've gone through
No.
my lineup probably four
Yep.
times this week. I'll go
Yep.
through it again tonight and maybe even tomorrow morning. I'll churn it through there. So I never just, well, I'm done. It's Tuesday. Boy, I'm bored. What am I going to do the rest of the week? No, I'm thinking and thinking and thinking.
So I love this chart, Professor, and I'll tell you exactly why. Because I think this chart is the type of chart where you can pick out a a positive defensive matchup. Okay. So if I've got a team on the far right
Hmm.
that is just muddling through, they're just,
Right,
they're not giving you a lot of targets per snaps. I'm not really going to care if they're playing a super soft defense.
right, right.
That's not going to be a big deal because if it was a great player, like I'm playing the guy anyway, but it's these marginal decisions, these last flex decisions
Yeah,
that are so
especially.
important. And I look at a team like Las Vegas that when they have a shot, when they put the ball in play, they target a lot of guys. And now, if they go up against a really weak defense, like they are this week with Denver, or with Dallas, I should say,
Yep.
I'm going to be more likely
Here's
to
Dallas here. Yeah.
to sprinkle in with Las Vegas because their defense, they got a good defensive matchup. I might sprinkle in a Trey Tucker or,
Yep.
you know, I might kind of go fishing for somebody off of that team. Would have been Jacoby Myers, but he's gone. So now it's a Trey Tucker, maybe even a Tyler Lockett, who they picked up and they seemed to target the crap out of last week. So, Lockett only put up 9 last week. I'm kind of thinking he's a better play this week
Yeah.
when you look at
I
this
mean,
data and against a
and
good
if you
defense.
and Dennis, I have the team level. So if you had a question about Lockett, then I don't know quite where it's at, but to see right there. Yeah, Lockett, I actually have it circled. Six
Yeah,
targets. He was
huge
target
jump.
leader.
First game that he
Yep,
was in uniform basically for Las
yep,
Vegas. First game he was ready to play.
yep.
6 targets.
Six.
That's
So that's
huge.
suspicious, and I actually picked him up when it was lean where I picked him up. Not a lot
Oh,
of places.
absolutely.
Yeah.
No, but he's a good spot play this week
Mhm.
against a weak defense. Maybe next week if he goes up against a tough defense, then all of a sudden your whole opinion on him is different. And
Mhm.
that's another thing I don't see enough of in fantasy football is I don't see embracing a guy one week and then saying no, he's not even in consideration the next. People just tend to ride the hot hand. And they don't see 6 targets as a hot hand because he only scored 9 points. But you and I see that jump, and we're just like licking our
Well,
chops,
and,
going,
and that's why I circled it.
"Yeah,
I'm just quickly without me writing. Like I said, I don't like sit there and write. There it is. I've done enough writing in my 30 years or more. I don't want to write anymore unless I'm paid for it. But to me, there's a lot of questions. So if you look at the team level, look at Meyer versus Bauer. Look at that, 4 versus 3. So that's a strange situation here. Giante got 5. And by the way, 5 is really, really good for a running back. And you're
oh
saying, well,
yeah."
how do you know that? Well, I've got the data to answer that question. Dennis, you'll like these. Here's running backs each week, the targets for the position, not the players.
Yep,
And I circled 4 and 6 because you'll see that 4 and 6 play into the other positions. But look at running backs.
yep,
Only the top are getting 4 or better. Look at the extreme. The top whiskers you're catching. Look at week
yes,
7. That was the strangest week, Dennis. Look, when there's
wow,
6 teams on bye,
yes. I think
look
you're
at the
correct.
pattern there. That's
Wow,
yeah. So there's some secrets there that we need to think about a little bit. Notice all the extremes. Anything above a whisker is in extreme and extreme. Here's tight ends. Notice how many dots, probably 10 over the season for running backs. So there is a possibility of such an extreme situation in running backs. It's rare, maybe 1 or 2 a week. Week 9, there was 3. Most weeks there's 1, sometimes there's 0. Look at tight ends. Okay, there's some. Look at wide receivers. Uh, let's see, run back. Here's tight ends. Here's wide receivers. Notice the extremes.
yeah,
There's not any.
no,
There's 1 week.
no, no,
So, as far as variation, running backs have shown, at least this year, and I need to track this over 10 years, Dennis, but the extreme nature of the running backs versus wide receivers, they're a lot more steady. And by the way, look at 6 and 4.
oh yeah, yep,
You see, look at the running back 6 and 4. So if you can imagine what that's saying is it's a little hard for wide receivers to be a little different and extreme versus the others, whereas running backs seeing the extremes and look at the variation in the whisker levels.
wow,
Lots of extreme. There's just more variation. You can really get the highs and lows, whereas wide receivers, it's a lot more steady. So I think there's a steadiness to wide receivers between 4 and 6 targets, so 5, And running backs, that it's maybe three is kind of run of the mill. So anytime you see some running backs in the fives, that should catch your attention. That's unusual, and anything beyond six is really unusual.
So
So
I'm glad.
again,
I'm
yeah. So last point. So this allows you to start thinking like that. People, I've never heard that discussed on the. I mean, I've been listening many a year, and there's none of that is ever discussed as a landscape. They're always at the player level. They're never giving you some ideas that things are not. If you listen to them, that running backs are the same as wide receivers in targets, and
Yeah.
that's not even close to
No.
being true. Go ahead, Dennis.
No, I agree wholeheartedly with that. And keep that running back chart up because
Yep.
I'll tell you one way that I have done research on this is and this has been more of a case of a shouldn't a guy score five or more fantasy football points when he gets five or more targets? Like, to me, he should. So what I have done with my MVP index is when I adjusted, because I used to just look at total snaps and I understood that that wasn't really indicative of what was going on because it was a lot different if a team had 75 snaps versus 40 in a game. You know,
Right.
those were the extremes. So what I did is I changed the minimum to a percentage of offensive snaps to determine a full game.
Right.
But what I realized was it's very unusual for a running back to get five or more targets.
Well,
But if you get
yep.
five or more targets, you should have had a pretty decent fantasy football day in PPR scoring.
Yes.
So when I look at a full game played, even if a guy had 25% of the snaps, if he had five targets, he got enough opportunities. So I count that as a full game because I understand how unusual that is. But seeing this graphically, I did the study and counted the number of five or more target games, and it was pretty small. So I said, okay, five targets, if that equated to five catches, that's 5 points
I might
right there in
argue
PPR.
four, Dennis. I might
Yeah,
argue
I
four based on this data.
yeah, and that's one thing I'm going to look at is I might drop that number to four because that might be more indicative of what's going
Well, it's
on.
the top of the box in
It's the
about
top of the box.
4 weeks,
Yeah,
and it's
yeah,
still, even four is extreme in the other six. Take a
yeah,
look at the other
yeah,
six.
yeah.
So
It that
this hammers it. It's funny what Dennis is saying, and it happens in all research and science. Is multiple people take different approaches to come to nearly the same conclusion,
yes,
and
yes,
different. And so again, this requires work and approach and effort and analytic skills to do that. And again, you just nobody talks about that. That should be in the off season. These should be lessons that people should discuss because Dennis is we're already highlighting four. So you go back last year and look at all the running backs who had an opportunity of four. You could even develop a system that way and then look at the last 10 years, Dennis. And is it predictable? See, then I go even further. If a running back, you could do a calm kind of thing like the level hitting four or higher. Is that predictable year to year?
yes,
And,
yeah.
and so we can use that for drafting purposes. That's how we get our secret stuff that we don't let you look at draft night out. We'll have to sword fight you with chicken wing if you try to get our data here. Take that chicken wing and sword fight them, Dennis. Them old eyes start getting on stalks. We have to slap them eyes back on our secret data there.
And that's why, folks, whenever I'm at draft night out, I also always ask for the celery with the hot wings.
That's right.
It's
Have
not.
something to
I want a
slap them
longer.
eyes back.
Yeah, I want a longer sword. It's not because the celery stalk's longer than the hot wing. That gives you
Yeah.
reach advantage. It's not because I like celery, folks.
Yeah.
But no, I love this data, Professor, because this is telling me that it's even more rare. And what I was looking at was 5 points, 5 fantasy football points is my minimum that a player has to have, or he had like a horrible game and he deserves a penalty. And so I figured 5 targets. If he got 5 targets, he sure as heck better be over 5 points. Or
Yeah.
otherwise, he really had a horrible game and he deserves
Right.
a penalty for that in the MVP.
Right.
But now I'm looking at this data, I'm like, maybe the bar's got to be set one notch lower
Yeah.
because 4 may be
And here's
what it
tight
is.
ends. And
Yep.
if you did 4 with tight ends, you'd catch almost everybody.
Yeah, and I
So I
use
might
5.
argue that
I use 5 for
5.
tight ends. I use
Huh?
5 for tight ends as well.
I would agree. I think 5 is real, Dennis. I think this data would suggest 5 is real. So if we put about 5, you see now you
Yeah.
move the bar higher and it's
Yep.
rarer.
Yep. Yep.
And then wide receivers, I'm almost arguing 6
Yeah. And I'll
or
probably
maybe 5.5 average.
yeah. And I'll probably continue to use 5 for wide receivers too
I
because I
think
want
you're
an
not,
even number.
yeah. I mean, I think 5 is okay, but I think 4 for
4 for
running
running
backs
backs
is
should
is probably
yeah.
better.
Yeah, that might be the one change that I might want to make. And I'm glad I'm seeing this data before I get too deep into the historical running back study.
Yeah. Well,
Don't want to have to go back and fix
yeah, it's
everything.
there, and that's how you gather folks that can help you do research, and that's why we're interested in trying to bring that to the expo, is trying to get more people interested. And in science there is a recording of findings and a sharing, and I don't
Yes.
know if we'll ever see that. It would be so nice because I think we would all progress more, because if we had kind of a collectiveness to where people share data and their findings, I think it would allow us to get even deeper into this and increase our progress in understanding the fantasy football. And right now, it's just not that way at all. I mean,
Yeah.
that's just not. No offense to the panels, but it's like the same old stuff. I don't. There's nothing. I've never seen anything like this to where let's talk about this concept. And Dennis and I could just lead a panel on this. And, it would be so different than what people are used to. No offense, I think it wastes a lot of people's time. I mean, I know it is what it is, Dennis, and it's selected for because that's what is perceived to be wanted. What they're seeing is just give us the fire. We don't give a damn about chopping down the tree. I understand, but
Yeah.
I'm not that way, and that's just
Well,
not how I roll.
you're talking about chopping down the trees. I remember uh, a question that was asked of a great lumberjack years ago. And they said, okay, you only have a hand axe to use, and you got to bring this big tree down, and you only have an hour to do it.
Right.
What do you do first? And he said, I spend the first 15 to 20 minutes sharpening the axe.
Yep.
And what we're doing with this data, what you've done with this data is sharpening the axe,
Yeah.
because This won't give you an answer on who to play necessarily for week 11,
Yep.
but it is a starting point for understanding who to target,
Yeah.
to play from. And again, nobody needs help understanding that Jamar Chase is going to be startable. Now, I've been going through some serious issues
With AJ Brown.
because I
Don't
last
start
week.
me on your team. Get rid
Yeah,
of me. Man, I
la-
don't need that kind of discussion.
no, last week it was benching Alvin Kamara,
Yeah.
and I knew it was the right move to make.
Yeah.
Okay, I knew it was the right thing to do, and it was still very hard
Yeah.
to do it. And the thing is, he gave you 14 points last
Yeah,
week,
it's
so
hard
it
to
might
walk
not have been
away
a
from talent, Dennis.
yeah,
We're
it might
not
not have
built that way.
no. But I had a couple of teams where I had enough depth at running back that 14, like he had a 14-point lead or a game last week, but that would have been fifth best on my team at running back. So I made the right decisions, but even that concept of benching Kamara was so foreign to me because he's been an automatic start because I know he's going to give me 8 points on a horrible week. Is going to be 8 points. And up until this year, that was always the case. This week, I'm having to go through that same deal with TJ Hawkinson.
Yeah.
I've got a team where I'm contemplating starting Theo Johnson ahead of TJ Hawkinson, and that shouldn't be a decision. And now this week, like you mentioned, AJ Brown mouthing off about.
I will
Oh,
say the the Giants have in the last few weeks been much better than the early part of the season. I have my late versus early. So the last 5 weeks versus the first five, the
interesting.
Giants are 1.3. So
Ooh,
there were sixth in improvement in tight end targets right
I
there.
like that.
So it's catching. Minnesota's about average.
Look at Schultz with Houston and look at Otten with Tampa Bay. Those are
Tell
not just lucky results.
Dennis, I've been over all those. We survived the Schultz drought, and look at Gadsden right there.
Gadsden also, and that those
Goobert, Goddard, I call him Goobert sometimes when he doesn't do well. And, McBride and Theo, and
and
Higbee a little.
look how it also corresponds to the second wide receiver becoming almost useless with
Oh,
all
yeah.
those teams.
Yeah. And here's wide receivers. Cincinnati has done well with,
Yep, yep.
Falco. Stroud has done much better recently, right? Brissett has actually turned it on.
Yep.
That kind of thing. So, folks, I actually have late versus early. So, if you
Oh, I love it.
want to see who's been improving in targets, again, not that you don't start Rice. Here's Kansas City. What that tells me is everybody else is falling off and Rice is getting his.
And Kelsey's coming back to the
Yeah,
top.
and you could look at you know Kelsey is I don't know where Kansas
Oh,
City
they're
is.
actually low. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
yeah. Well,
interesting.
Dennis, Kelsey actually. I
But
think
Gray has
things
fallen off to nothing.
maybe
Noah,
that's you're
yeah,
catching some of these metrics. And again,
yeah,
folks, it's not the end of the show. It's just this is supposed to inspire you to think why. What is going on with this situation? I know with the Jets, Garrett Wilson's gone.
oh yeah,
Miami has Waddle, and that's about it. Malik has not done what we thought he would do. San
yeah,
Francisco's been a train wreck. Carolina, you would thought would have been doing better, but they've been lean the last few weeks. And having Puka gone for a few weeks, that hurt the Rams a little bit. So you can see what's changing and see, what's going on. Poor Arizona, they're probably going to start dropping now that Harrison is gone
Oh,
and
yeah.
that kind of thing. So you can use this early versus late is a way to see what's going on recently. I have the chart if you're curious, just colorized on the the targets and then who's improved lately. So Atlanta, one of the highest RB targets, and they've improved. So they're a green green. Cincinnati green green. That's about it for the double greens there. Look at Jacksonville, sad early, but boy, they come on late. That kind of thing. So you can spot some trends, Dennis.
And you could see when Woody Marks became more of a thing with Houston. Look at that jumping to green.
Yep. So this is there, folks. You can use this data. Uh, I'm just trying to track some of these, uh, targets, speed of targets, and improvement at the team level. And I've got a lot of other stuff, Dennis. I don't know if we want to talk. I don't know if we want to go team by team. I have circled things that caught my attention. Like last week, DeMarcado's back. He got the best
Yeah.
four versus Bam Knight. So Bam is four. That's interesting, but DeMarcado got four. So that's intriguing. Here's Harris at 12. Oh my goodness. So this week I had a question: Wilson versus Dortch, and
You gotta think it's gonna be Wilson.
yep,
Zay Jones is out, Harrison's out. But the question I have is Wilson going to see the jump, or is, five or
Dortch.
six going to be his normal? And does Elijah Higgins jump up to five or six to go with Trey McBride?
Yeah. Well, here's the data. That again, you can have different, and people don't realize that the data is the data. It's the analysis of the data that can be different among people. Their projections, their forecasting, and that's fine. We can debate that. That's where as long as you start with a foundation versus, I felt like he was running harder last week. And so therefore, blah, blah, blah. Well, what do you mean running harder? You mean he was
Yeah.
faster? In other words, that's when it loses me, is when they're just having nebulous kind of statements versus, when everybody's got a chip and we can measure speed, it's like, okay, well, at least that's something to hang your hat on. But just, that he was running fierce last week, or it was a revenge game. Can you measure revenge, Dennis? Do they run faster? Do they leap higher and catch? See, I don't know. There's just all these things that are not metric driven that I hear a lot, and I understand you're on the radio and you're not supposed to be like, what the hell are you talking about? You know, he's running angry. What's that mean? He's gritting his teeth more. I mean, is that the metric you're using? The gritting the teeth? Are you measuring the bite force on his mouth guard? What the hell are you measuring here?
So so
That's where I lose it, Dennis, on that
yes.
versus he got, Ricardo and Knight got 4 and 4 and McBride 13. And so now, is Wilson going to go up to 12 or, he had 7. Where's he going? If Dortch gets, say, 5 and Wilson stays at 7, does that mean Higgins gets 3 or 4 more, or he's up to 7? So it's 13-7. I mean, that is a legitimate debate, not just, well, Higgins was running angry last week, so if we give him more targets, he'll really do something this week. What? Go ahead, Dennis.
So here's one of the issues I have, because I actually heard somebody talking about this this week, or saw somebody talking about this on Twitter. Oh, where are those 12 targets going for Marvin Harrison this week? And my first question was, how unusual was 12 targets for Marvin Harrison? And looking at this data, that's the only week he did it. So why are we distributing 12
I
targets
would
from a
argue
guy?
10. So I
10
would
or
argue
maybe even
maybe
9.
even 8,
Yeah,
maybe.
8 or 9. So let's say it's
If
only 8 or
Wilson gets
9.
2, Dortz
Yeah.
gets 4, that's 6. The other 4, say Higgins
And,
gets 2, that kind of thing.
yeah, and some of them might just go away because they just
Just
might
go
not
away.
throw as many times. So
Right.
the targets will naturally go down. But let's say we're trying to redistribute 8 or 9 targets. I'd say maybe 1 or 2 to Wilson because 7 was already big for him.
Yes, it was.
So maybe just goes up to 8 or 9.
Maybe.
13 for McBride was high, but
But it wasn't unusual.
he's done that several times.
Yeah.
So I would suggest that he'll probably go up maybe to 4 or 14. Higgins getting 3. I'm suggesting he might get 5 or 6 this week.
Okay.
And then Knight and DeMarcado, I might just take him away from Knight and give you might say Knight's maybe a 2-target guy if he plays. He's questionable. And DeMarcado might be a 5 or 6. So that's the way I would look at this data. And I'm like, man, I'd lean into DeMarcado as a starter because I think he's going to be getting opportunities with Harrison out. Wilson is probably going to be a 6 to 8 target guy this week with Harrison out. He did 7. And so, the question is how many of those came after Harrison left the game, that kind of stuff. But, I hear people, oh, where are those 12 targets going? Well, some of them aren't even going to be there. Like we're distributing 8 targets, and we may start out by reducing a couple of guys to their averages, and maybe the bump is from the average. So in other words, if you're saying, oh, Knight should pick up 1 or 2, his average has been 2.6. It's not been 4. 4 was unusual. So maybe he just gets back to 4 or 5. And same with DeMarcado. And DeMarcado's a different situation because he always had Carter and Benson or Connor or Knight ahead of him. And now he's going to be down to maybe just Carter, who they don't even use in the passing game very often. So this is interesting. This is a chart that you can chew on a lot of stuff, but I would say before you distribute those targets, figure out how many are being redistributed. And in the case of Harrison, it's 7 is the answer. That's the average number he's had is just under
Dennis,
7.
I would just look at wide receivers for each week, and it looks like 12. Some weeks a little less, some a little more, but you're talking about 12. I mean, 19, 20 was unusual. Look at the week before, it's 14. The week before, 14. The week before, 18.
Yeah.
The week before, 13. So I might be bouncing between, say, 16 and 12, so maybe 14. So it could be Wilson 7, Dort 7. I mean, that could be a scenario, or it could be 7 and Dortz gets 3. So then the other 2 or 3 go to Higgins is your scenario. So there's the debate is the shuffling of the deck chairs, right? You're hoping
Right.
it's not the
Right.
Titanic, but uh, anyway, there's the debate, but they don't even start that way. It's all sorts of other crazy talk that they have. Running
Well,
angry this week. What?
oh, yeah. It's fascinating that we don't even understand sometimes what we're arguing. We just grab the previous week and that's what we're arguing.
Yeah.
Where we should be arguing, okay, what is a legitimate number for this player?
Yeah.
And some of the guys, it's hard to read. I mean, you just put Pitts up on the screen.
Yeah.
what is Pitts's average is 6.5 to,
Yeah,
a
yeah,
little over 6.5. He's never, he hasn't been at that number really for a while. He's all over the place. 4 to 10 is his range. That's huge.
it is. Look at Bijan last week. You talk about variation too. Week before 10, 3, 8, 8. So, folks, if nothing else, when you look at that, look at you just look through the numbers and see the variation. And if you ask yourself why fantasy is tough, it's because it's a system
Yes.
and the pieces are moving in such a way that you can have a 2 or a 10. And, it's tough to figure that out. And look at Mooney last week, got an 8. Man, he hadn't done that since week 3, had an 11. I mean, what an, but I don't think I'd pick him up because look at the week before. In other words, it's not a guarantee he's doing an 8. I
And,
would say
and,
probably back to a 4.
and with 8 targets,
Oh, I didn't say he
he's
did
he
anything
scored
with them.
he scored 2 points.
Yeah.
When he had 11 targets, he scored 8 points.
Yeah, that's sad.
That's really bad.
Yeah.
Like, I that's the way I like to look at this data is I look at the spike weeks. What do you do with them? Nothing. Well, then he really isn't a guy that I want on that team. And then you look at the variability. Oh my goodness. I don't like huge target spikes in either direction. I like a player that's more predictable. And then you have to look at the trends because Flowers was getting targeted a lot when
In
Jackson's
Baltimore.
gone,
Yeah.
and now Jackson's back and the targets drop.
Yeah.
That's sometimes what you have to read
Boy,
as
I'm
well.
not happy seeing this when I saw Andrews. It's just you
Oh,
need those touchdowns so bad to make him pay.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I would. I, if I knew what I knew, I probably would have not. I think I got him in 2 leagues out of 40. I wouldn't even have drafted those two. I would have fished elsewhere here.
yeah.
Uh,
And a lot of the times, your draft at tight end is based on back class,
yeah,
and he's got oogles of back class, but maybe Father Time has caught up with him.
yeah. So with Buffalo, it's Shakir. I think I'm happy with his 6 or 7. But
Oh yeah,
boy, trying to predict Coleman, good luck. Seven,
yeah.
6, 4, 2, 8. Uh-oh. Is it a 2 week? Is it a 6 week? Is it a 8 week?
Wow,
Ruh-roh.
2 to 11 variance on that is crazy.
It's crazy crackers, Dennis. So anyway, Dennis, all these teams, I've got them for y'all to figure out. And remember when Leggett was the thing? And boy,
Oh
it's
yeah,
been a drought here the last 3 weeks.
yeah.
And
He's not been healthy, and it shows. He's just
yeah,
not
you
getting
you can
anything.
see. So, folks, it just allows y'all to look at things and to see what you need to look at. Monangai with Swift back, Rutro 5 to 1.
Wow.
It's Dennis. I'm looking to replace him or put him in a deep flex. He better get you a touchdown. It's sad. I mean, I don't think Swift will get 8, but I think he'll get more than Monangai.
Swift will get his 4 or 5 targets,
Yeah.
is what I think this chart tells you. Most weeks, you're going to get 4 or 5 targets from Swift, which gives him a solid enough floor to make him an automatic start.
And people were talking about Loveland. Well, Komet's out, so he's, to the moon. He got 5. And
Yeah.
then got next week 7 and 4.
With Komet back, he
And
got
Komet
more.
back. So there wasn't to the moon. What does to the
No.
moon mean? To me, if he had
Ah,
got 10, that would have been to the moon.
yeah. Double up from, if you would have gotten, significantly more than twice his average, and his
Nope,
average
he
at that
didn't.
point was 3.5. He would have
Yeah.
needed,
Nope, he
yeah,
didn't.
just he doubled it, which isn't bad, but that's not enough to, well, he went from 3.5 to 5. That's not. That's not to the moon.
Yeah, and again, I think use these team level, and I don't know, do sites even show it this way? I like to colorize it. I like to break it apart. I like to circle things that I'm interested in. And my heart, I just need a photographic memory so I don't have to look at this again. But I actually have on my iPad, I have to go back to my own figures and if I've got a
Yeah.
question. I mean, the thing is, folks, I'm not starting here setting my lineup. I'm usually setting my lineup, getting the studs in there, and then it's usually the flexes or the streaming quarterbacks and tight ends. There's some of my questions. And then I start going back through here to let this stuff kind of drive my thinking, Dennis. But no, I don't worry about should I start Jamar Chase, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I don't have time to debate that. I got serious debates to figure out this week. So I've got all teams for folks. It's up on the site. Y'all can check that out. It's all good. Notice how Dennis his voice goes up an octave. He gets so excited by this data. He's like a dog chewing on data bone here, and it's really good that way. But I know we need to move on because we got another show to tape as well, and this is the games for the week here, Dennis. And we already had the New England Jets. Did they make 50? I forgot. I don't think
Nope.
they.
Nope.
Huh?
41.
Yeah, see, you and I
So,
both
yep.
said, and my first question, they don't need 34 points to
No.
beat the Jets. Yeah, so we got one big giant game, Dallas and Vegas. So we're going to cover the highs and the lows on the matchup lab for fantasy, the sports affiliation. So you want to do a couple of these, and then we'll shut this down, or what you want to
Yeah,
do?
let's do that. We're going to use Dallas and Las Vegas, and we're going to use
One of those.
let's do the Rams Seattle as our other
Oh,
Husky game.
okay.
So let's do Chicago and Minnesota.
Okay, I will be moving to that again. Folks, the power rankings are listed for this week. Use that. The predicted rushing for this week and the predicted passing. Again, this is not, this is not in stone. I'm just doing a beta test and trying to figure stuff out. We talked about this Wednesday, and just for y'all, this is for your knowledge. If you need something here, you talk about scale this week, Cincinnati. That's going to be very interesting, Dennis, with coming back off the bye. I'm not. I'm still going to start Chase, but I hate. This scares me. I hate to see crazy crap like that. Okay,
Ye-
let's go to the other one. We're doing game 5. Here it is. Minnesota 27, Chicago 21. Vegas says it's 3. 49, so it seems close. Chicago's away, and Swift's going to have to earn his biscuits with Monangai. So you got to figure out how you're going to play those guys. It looks like it's passing. Looks like Loveland might get a taste. Definitely want to play the defense, Dennis. This is a viable streamer, and the kicker is viable. Santos, so wasn't he hurt the week before? Or what? No, it was a wind game that we were worried about with Santos.
yes.
But
Yep.
so I think you can flip back onto him if you need a kicker. Minnesota, on the other hand, it should be play them all. So it even I think Vegas sees this kind of Chicago defense, and that's why they're home. And the Chicago defense has not been as strong as they need to be. So I think the combination of the home field advantage and the easier Chicago D, and I think this could be very interesting to play them all. So Hawkinson does have an opportunity this week here, Dennis. We can
Yes.
I don't know where you can look at the DAPS on Theo, but just improvement wise, but then again, remember that was with Dart. So
Correct.
yeah, so
Correct.
I would not stream Minnesota D this week. Minnesota is 67 efficiency, which is points, yards, and speed of game, and Chicago. So they're about the same. Minnesota loves away games, Dennis. How about that?
That's
And so
crazy.
5 and 3% less passing and rushing, yet the defense says play us all, play all the offense. So that's a little strange. Chicago away, they like to pass 10% more, rush 10% less, exactly what the DAPs are giving them. So Chicago, in some ways, this away in the defense, so that means Swift. I mean, I'm going to play Swift, but I don't know if he gets 2 touchdowns this week. So it looks like Chicago passing. Maybe you got some opportunities there, or maybe Loveland gets a touchdown this week. Accidentally there.
Well, here's my take on this game, and I agree that you can comfortably play them all for Minnesota, with the exception of the quarterback. And I'm looking at tight end. I really am. Hawkinson's at 2, actually 3 down weeks. He's not really had a strong game all season. His MVP index is really bad right now. So, and when I say really bad, folks, when it comes to MVP, he's at a he he's at a minus MVP right now for the season. That's how bad it's gotten with Hawkinson. This is a guy who you expect to be around 65 to 70 on his MVP every year, and he's at a minus 22 after 10 weeks. That becomes a guy that I look at very closely. And I think what we're going to see in this game is I think, while the Chicago defense has been giving up a lot of yards, they've been a very opportunistic defense lately, turning the ball over. And the key is if Minnesota turns the ball over and gives Chicago a short field, I think that's going to be the difference. So I like Chicago to pull off the upset, and I like the over. I think there's going to be a lot of points scored in this, because even if Minnesota turns the ball over, they're going to be throwing a lot, and they're going to be getting a lot of success with that throwing game. So
Nice.
that's kind of how I see it. But I'm gonna take a sneak peek at whatever the professor's picking when those picks come out, because
Hey,
he has
do
been the
y'all get to?
master
Do they get to see my picks?
only after the games have started.
Oh,
But I think the professor's the guy that you should be listening to when it comes to those picks, because
I
he
don't
is
know.
kicking my butt, folks. All righty, let's look at one right in the middle. Let's take a look at this Kansas City Chiefs team for some reason. Let's
I don't
look at
know. What
Kansas
is
City and
this?
Denver. I for some reason I think,
Uh,
it's because they're coming back from bye, and Reed has a good record for that, I'm told. So let's look at that game for
Kansas City away
ooh,
favorite 26, Denver 18. That is really, I was surprised that it wasn't closer. Denver wins ugly, and
yes.
they can be down and somehow come back. I don't know. Spread is 444. That seems high given the DAPS. Uh, it's going to be very interesting. Denver at home, play nobody. Kansas City, play the kicker. Okay. I think Kelsey has an opportunity. The running backs, Kareem Hunt, if they can get down there, I guess can stumble in the end zone. Rice is going to get his, but boy, I think it gets lean after Rice, Dennis. And, I think Mahomes is going to have to, he's going to have to ignore my DAPS. I know Mahomes checks this right before he goes onto the field, and he will need just to ignore this. completely and don't pay attention to what the data is saying. He can bust through the data here, having an away, to the moon game for Mahomes here. Denver's at home. Denver 61 efficiency, Kansas City 53, so that's pretty close. I'm not making much out of that. Denver home 12% better. So they play really great at home. They're improving the last few weeks. 20% in passing, but they hadn't seen a Kansas City D. So it's weird when you see things like this, but then you see the depths. That's in conflict. And part of being an analyst, Dennis, is juggling with this conflict here. And I still, I mean, I'm playing Franklin, you know, Harvey, I'm not playing probably Nix because he can turn over the ball. I'm playing I mean, Ingram, if I gotta play him, I'm just, I'm finding it hard to play any Denver. Kansas City, I love Rice. I'm playing Kelsey, playing Mahomes, but I'm not. Dennis, this could be a lean game here. Kansas City away, it's all about the passing. 13% more pass. Look at the rush. 45% less rushing. Dennis, they
Wow.
don't even need the running backs except at the goal line, and they'll maybe launch them over with the Kansas City uh, barbecue rib tush push or whatever, brisket push or whatever they call it down there. Throw him over the lineman, Dennis, launch him. Why not? Get a let's do it. Get a catapult and throw it. Let's play some extreme NFL. Why not? Go on an aircraft carrier and do extreme NFL. And in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, why not? Let's stream it with YouTube. So anyway, that's what I think here. I'm lean to play Denver, but probably got to play some Kansas City people.
So here is my big question. And again, this leans into another possible research topic for later on in the year or for off season. And I'm not even sure that it's worth spending the time on the research because it just might be such an unusual circumstance that when we look at the circumstance, we might say, this has happened with 1 out of 32 teams. Is it worth the investment? Denver's schedule in the first 10 games has been unusually favorable. The total win-loss record over under is 14 and a half games under 500 right now for Denver's opponents. 7 of their games this season, so 7 of the 10 games they've played this year, have been against teams who have lost 5 or more times already this season. So that is horribly skewed to being weaker teams, and weaker teams usually mean weaker offenses. So I'm wondering if their DAPs are inflated by a category. So instead of tough, maybe they belong in the below average across the board. Whereas Kansas City's matchups have been really tough. In fact, most of their games have been against teams with 6 or more wins. So it's horribly, in contrast, yet they've still been able to maintain some pretty tough across the board on stuff. So maybe with a situation like this, Kansas City is not facing the juggernaut defense we think they are, and Denver is. So I like Kansas City in this game, but I agree with you. Both defenses are above average. I'm not saying that Denver's defense is crap, okay? I'm just saying I think they're inflated by one category. So, in other words, instead of below average, maybe it's above average for running backs and tight ends instead of extra tough. Maybe it's just tough for quarterbacks and wide receivers. So that's how I'm reading this. And maybe Kansas City belongs in the extra tough category for at least two of these. So I think that is going to be my pick. But again, with two tough defenses, with Kansas City on the road, I am expecting an under on this one. We will save the rest of the games. We'll save the Squirrels and the Huskies for the matchup lab. Head on over to the Science of Fantasy Football. Check out this target data by the professor. There is so much data there. I need to look at it a third time because I will see patterns in this data that will help me with my fantasy picks. Check out my two articles, Leader of the Pack. You can see where folks are rated in their by position based on my 4 different metrics that I use that factor in this season more and more every week. And then head on over to the sports affiliation, of course, and check out the matchup lab coming next. And then head on back here next week for another edition of the Science of Fantasy Football.
Get to work, folks.
How'd you like that?
I
think Denver's inflated.
Yeah, I like that. That was good. I think
Denver might be inflated. We'll see this week.
Okay,
though.
I'm gonna shut the recording.
That is a rivalry though that
yeah.
usually leads to some pretty interesting games.
I'm looking forward to it. Okay, let me shut this puppy down.
I wouldn't have had Kansas City favored by more than 1.
Yeah, I think it's gonna be tough.
I think it's gonna be a close game.
Yep.